Hello and welcome back to another video. In this video, you'll learn how to include GPT-4 API in your own JavaScript project. So GPT-4 is definitely an upgrade on GPT 3.5, but for the most part, it seems very similar. So apparently, it's way more creative in its responses, and it is able to handle larger prompts and produce longer output. So one of the new features is to provide visual input into the model, for example, images, and we can then ask the AI to describe the image or to translate text in the image, etc. So for this demo, I created a very simple web application which will accept a URL to an image, and we can then provide it a prompt. For example, we can ask the AI to describe the image. For this demo, I generated this image using Midjourney, but you can use any image that is available online. So for example, I'll copy this URL, paste it in our application, and I'll just add a prompt for tell me what you see in the following image. Let's give this a spin. It will take a few seconds to complete. We can see the response. The image features a beautiful red-headed woman wearing a green dress. She has a fair skin tone with freckles, and her hair is long and wavy. So it's doing a very good job of analyzing this image. Let's ask it some specifics like what is the color of her hair, and let's send that. And it's saying that the hair is red. What color is her eyes? And it's saying that she's got green eyes. What color is her dress? And it's saying that she's wearing a green dress. So although this demo is very simple, there are a lot of use cases for this. So if we go back to the documentation, you can see the example that they used where they provide an image of a whole bunch of ingredients and then ask the AI to tell us what recipes we can make using these ingredients. So enough talk, let's build this application. Right, so the first thing you need to create an account on OpenAI. You can do this by going to platform.openai.com and then create your account. At the time of making this video, the GPT-4 API is only available if you join the waitlist. If that's still the case, all you need to do is click on join the API waitlist and then enter your details here. After a few days, you should see an email like this saying you can now access the GPT-4 API. Once your access has been approved, you can test it out by going to platform.openai.com and then going to the Playground tab. In Playground, you can find the GPT-4 model under chat, and you should see it over here. So how this works is the user will provide a prompt from the front end, and our prompt will be structured in a certain way. So first we'll add the text that the user entered, followed by the URL that the user provided. So it will look something like this. And after running this, we'll get this response from the AI. I've seen a lot of videos and articles where the developers run into this issue, where when you run this prompt, the AI might respond with something in the lines of, I'm an AI model and I'm not able to process images. So I found that if we add the following prompt to the system, it will reduce those type of issues. So in the system, add this prompt. Use your ability to analyze images, to accept an image URL, and then assist the user with their prompt. Let's just test this out again. Describe the following image, and let's run this. All right, perfect. Right, so let's get started with our application. For this demo, I'll be using Next.js because we need server-side logic as well as our front end. But you can really use whatever framework you want. Feel free to create an Express server or use SvelteKit or whatever you prefer. Right, so first open up your IDE and create a new folder. Then, in order to initiate a new Next.js application, run npx create next app add latest, followed by a period. Would you like to use TypeScript? I'll say no. ESLint? No. Source directory, no, and we'll use the experimental app directory. And for import aliases, just press enter. For styling the application, we'll use Tailwind CSS. So to set this up, I'll click on Get Started, Framework Guides, and I'll click on Next.js. We've already executed step 1, so let's do step 2. You can just copy these commands. Back in VS Code, I'll just paste in those 2 commands and press enter. For step 3, we need to add the following content to the tailwind.config file. So back in our project, I'll open up tailwind.config and replace the content with this. We then need to add these 3 lines to the globals.css file. So back in our project, under app, we can open up globals.css and replace it with those 3 lines. I'll just delete any files that I don't need. So I'll delete page.module.css, and in the page.js file, we can delete all of these imports, and I'll delete everything from main to the closing main tag, I'll just add back in this main tag with the header of hello world. Let's run our server by running npm run dev. You should find the link to the local dev server in the console. And after opening up this, we can see hello world. So our dev server is working. Before we build the front end, I'd like to focus on the back end logic first. Because we need to run the OpenAI logic on the server, we need to implement our own API first. We can create an API within the app folder and within this API folder. Next.js has given us the sample function, which is a get method, and all this does is it returns hello Next.js. We can test out these API endpoints by using a program like Postman. So what we can do here is enter the URL and then followed by the name of the directory, like hello. In this route file, we only have a get method available, so I'll set the verb here to get. Let's run this. After running this, we do get that response back, hello Next.js. Right, so for our application, I'm going to rename hello to OpenAI. I'm also going to change the get to a post. Let's save this, and in Postman, I'll change the method back to post, and let's run this. Okay, that won't work because I also need to change it to OpenAI. Let's run again, and that works. Right, in order to call functions on OpenAI, we need to install the following package. So in the console, let's run npm install OpenAI. Also, in order to call functions on OpenAI, we need to provide OpenAI with an API key. We can get the API key by going back to our OpenAI platform. You can click on Personal, View API Keys, and you can then click on Create New API Key. We can then copy this key and go back to our project. Right, so in our project, we can either save this key in the method itself, but this key is private and it needs to be protected. So it's recommended to store this value in an environment variable file. So in the environment file, we can now create a new variable called OpenAI API key, and we can paste in the key value. Please ensure to use your own key. I will be deleting this one after the video. Then back in the route file, we need to import a few things from OpenAI. So we can import configuration and OpenAI API. Then in our post method, we first need to create this configuration object by instantiating the configuration class, and then we need to specify the API key by referencing the OpenAI API key value in the environment variable file. We can then instantiate a new object for OpenAI and then pass in the configuration object as input. We now have access to the OpenAI functions using this OpenAI object. I'm going to wrap this logic in a try-catch block just to deal with any exceptions that we might get back from calling OpenAI. If we do receive any errors from OpenAI, I do want to return them as a new response, and we'll simply return the error text. So we'll pass back an object with an error parameter, and the value will be error.message. This object also needs to be JSON stringified, so I'll call JSON.stringify and then wrap this object in this stringify function. Right, let's add the logic to the try block. First, I'm going to just move this return statement to the try block. And now in the try block, we can call a function on OpenAI. So we'll call OpenAI.createChatCompletion. So just a note, we will not be calling create completion like with GPT 3.5. Instead, we'll call the chat completion function. If we go back to OpenAI for a second to the playground, we can see that on the completion functions, we do not have access to GPT-4, but it is available on the chat completion. And that is why we're calling the create chat completion function in our code. The create chat completion function takes in an object as input. The first value that we need to specify is the model that we want to use. In this case, we're using GPT-4, and we also need to specify the list of messages. So messages is an array with objects. The first message in this array will be the instruction from the system role. So back in OpenAI, it is this role over here. So for this, we'll specify a role of type system, and for its content, I'll provide the following text. Use your ability to analyze images to accept an image URL, and then assist the user with their prompt. Then for the second message in this list, we'll create a role of type user. And for the content, we'll pass in the value of the prompt that the user specified. This will be this message here. So this is the user role. And then we'll specify the text like analyze the following image with the URL. And this will be a value that we get back from the user. And this will be a value that will be passed in the body of the request message. So we need to extract this prompt value from the body of our request. At the top of this function, I will destructure prompt, and we will get that from the request object.json. We can then take this prompt value and pass that in as the content for the user prompt. The createChatCompletion function returns a promise, which we need to await, and let's assign that to a response variable. Once we get a response back from OpenAI, we want to pass that back as the value in this API call. We will also JSON.stringify this result. We'll pass in an object with the response attribute, and the value of this attribute will be the response that we got back from OpenAI, .data.choices, and in this case, we will only receive one choice. We should be able to test this out. So let's start up the dev server if it's not running. Let's go back to Postman and let's try to call this. So in Postman, I'll just go to body. I'll go to raw. So I'll pass in a JSON request. So just ensure that you select JSON from this list. We'll open the request with these brackets and then we'll pass in a value for prompt. And let's give a value like hello there. And let's run this. And after running this, we can see the response coming back from OpenAI. So in the response, we've got this message object. Within message, we get the role for assistant, which is the AI. Just to show you on OpenAI what that looked like. So after running this, we get this response back from the assistant role with the content of the message. So that is what we're seeing here. So we're getting a response back from assistant and it's responding to our request of hello. Excellent. That is it for this API. Now let's call our API from our front-end application. So back in page.js, let's do the following. The first thing that we need to do with this file is, since Next.js is server components by default, we need to add this one line to the top of the file to make it accessible to users. So we'll just add this line for use client. I'm going to add a few classes to main. So I'll add class names for container, margin top of 6, MX auto for centering the content in the middle of the page, padding left and right of 4, max width of 2XL. We'll align the content flex and flex column for vertical alignment and a gap of 4 just to create some spacing in between the content. Let's refresh the app. So we can see Hello World showing up with some margin top and some padding on the sides. Let's change this from Hello World to GPT-4 image analyzer. And let's add some styles to this header tag. We'll add a text of 4XL and a font of bold. So below the header, we'll then add the form. So just to show you what I'm referring to, we'll add 2 input fields as well as this button. So let's add the first input field. So I'll add input as a self-closing tag. I'll give input a few classes as well. So for the input, we'll add padding of top and bottom of 2, padding left and right of 2. We'll tell it to take up the full width with a background of white. We'll create a border with a border color of gray 700. We'll give the placeholder text a color of gray 700 and we'll round the corners as well. Then I'll give this some placeholder text like enter an image URL. And in order to reference the values in this field, we'll import the package from React and specifically the useRef package from React. We can then create an object to link this to. So I'll create a variable called URLRef and I'll make that equal to useRef. So let's go back to the input field. We'll add a property called ref and we'll assign URLRef to this. For the prompt, I'm just going to copy this input field. Let's change this text to enter a prompt. We'll create another reference field. We'll call this one prompt ref and we'll assign prompt ref to this field. Lastly, we'll add the button. We'll give the button some text like analyze and we'll give the button some styles as well. We'll set the text as uppercase, vertical padding of 2, horizontal padding of 2. We'll round the corners. We'll give it a background color of lime 700 and we'll set the text to white. Let's also add some styles to the form tag. We'll add flex column for vertical alignment, and a gap of 2. Great. Okay, so on the form, let's add an onSubmit event handler. And on the onSubmit event handler, we'll call handle submit. Let's create this function. So we'll create this handle submit function, which takes the event as input. And the first thing it needs to do is call event.prevent default. This will prevent the page from refreshing when we click on analyze. Because we'll be working with the fetch API, we need to convert this function to async. Then what we want to do is call the fetch API, and we want to call the API that we just created. And we can find that under API/ OpenAI. We need to specify some additional attributes like the method, which needs to be post. We need to specify the headers, which takes in a content type of application JSON. And in the body, we want to pass in the prompt. And the prompt will be a concatenation of these two fields. So the first part of the prompt will be the prompt ref.current.value, followed by the URL ref.current.value. The fetch API returns a promise, which we need to await, and we also want to assign this result to a variable called res. After the API call, we just want to perform a check to see if res.ok is successful. So we'll check if res.ok is not successful, and if it's not, we'll just raise a new error with the text unable to fetch response. So what I also want to do is just wrap this logic in a try-catch block. So at the top of this, I'll call try. I'll move all of this code into the try block. And after try, we'll call catch, which receives the error object. And for now, we'll just write any error messages to the console. After checking if res is okay, we need to convert the response to something that we can use. So I'll create a new constant called data, and I will then await res.json. Let's console log the value of data for now. Let's test this out. In the browser, I'll open up the developer tools, I'll open up the console, and let's try this. I'll grab the URL of this image, I'll paste it here, and in the prompt, I'll just write something like describe the image. Let's run this. Okay, so when running this, we are getting an error message, and that is because in our logic, when we pass in the body, we can't pass in the object like this. We need to parse it first. So I'll just call json.stringify, and we'll wrap this object in the stringify function. Let's save this. I'll clear out the console, and let's run this again. After a few seconds, we get this response back. And if we open up this response object, we can see the message coming back from the assistant, as well as the description of the image. So this seems to be working. So let's show the image and the response on the page. So back in our code, we need to write the value that we get back from OpenAI to a state variable. And then we'll write out the value of the state variable in the HTML. So to do this, we'll also import useState from React. And I will then create these states. So the first one is for the image. I'll just call it image, and the setter function I will call setImage. That is equal to useState. And initially the value will be null. The second state is called text with the setter function of setText. And on this, we'll call useState, and the initial value will be a blank string. The last state that I want to create is called loading with the setter function of setLoading with an initial value of false. We'll set loading to true when we call OpenAI, and we'll set it to false once we're done. This is just so that we can have some feedback on the screen that shows the user that we're waiting for feedback from OpenAI. So in our handle submit function, the start of our code will set loading to true. And then after we've called OpenAI, or after we've dealt with any exceptions, we want to set loading to false. So for this, I'll also add a finally block to the try catch. So whether we get an exception or processing was successful, finally will be triggered. And in finally, we will call set loading, and we'll set that back to false. We will also set the image as URL ref.current.value. And we also want to set the text to an empty string. Then, after we receive data, we want to call setText to data.response.message.content. Then I want to create a div for showing the image. So I'll create a div. Within div, we'll create an image tag, which is self-closing, and the source of the image will be the value of the image state variable. Then, below the image, we want to create another div, which will restore the text that we got back from OpenAI. For this, I'll add a header as well with the text of response. Let's give this header a few styles, like text 2XL and font semi-bold. Then below this header, I want to write this content conditionally. So if loading is true, then I want to return a p tag with the text analyzing. Else, if loading is false, in other words, we got a response back, then we'll write out the p tag, and the content of this will be the value of text. I also want to give the analyzing p tag a style, so I'll add class name. And the style that we want to add is animate pulse. So what this will do is while analyzing is shown, the text will just pulse to indicate that it's loading. Right, let's give this a spin. So I'll just copy this image URL again and paste it here. And for the prompt, I'll add the text, describe the image, and let's click Analyze. The image is showing up, and below the image we can see the response and the text analyzing. And once this is done, we can see the response from the AI. If you want, you can leave it like this. I do want the image and the text to be next to each other. So what I'll do is I'll actually wrap the image and the text in another div. And I'll give this wrapping div some styles. I'll add grid as well as grid columns too. And I'll give some spacing between the two elements with a gap of 4. Awesome. After saving this, we can see the image as well as the response. Let's try another prompt like, what is the color of her hair? Let's try this, and we get our response. Right guys, this was a very quick demo on how to use GPT-4 in your applications. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, where I do a lot of videos and content based on AI. And please like this video as it will help this channel grow. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.